Last night, what you saw at Columbia University is open support for Hamas. You have students at Columbia University and faculty at Columbia University who are cheering on Hamas. They are denying. And the administration, Columbia's administration, not only won't do anything about it, they are refusing to let the NYPD in. They are letting the terrorists in and giving the NYPD out. So my message is not to the cowards at Columbia's administration. My message is to the mayor. We don't need your empty remarks about not being okay. Right now, we are not okay.
Yeah, I think it's a testament to the Palestinian exception to free speech. I came to Columbia because I thought it was a progressive space for people who care about social justice and human rights. And at every turn, I have been shown that that doesn't apply to Palestinians like myself. You know, my peers, my classmates have friends and family that are still trapped under the rubble in Gaza, and we are being criminalized on our own campus, quite literally being taken out in zip ties because our president thought that we were a threat.
Follow up on the protests. I get you don't want to go into specifics, but what does the president think about young people in America saying things like, "We are all Hamas and long live Hamas"?
Okay, I will say, look, this is a president that has been, since he's been in office, and the reason why he ran has been very clear about what he witnessed in Charlottesville. Let's not forget what we saw, the anti-Semitism, the bigotry, the hate that we saw in the street of Charlottesville, which, as I just stated, was one of the reasons that he decided to run.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. We got to talk about the victimhood wars of America, because Americans are, in fact, at war with each other over who is the biggest victim, right? Who's the biggest victim, right? Based off your identity, right? And I got to tell you guys, I am really enjoying it from the perspective of this is tearing the left apart. However, what I'm not enjoying is the lives that are being lost that have led to this conflict that the left is having with itself, okay? I'm not enjoying the fact that Jewish people have lost their lives, that Palestinian people, including Christians, have lost their lives. I don't enjoy that, right? I think that that is a very terrible thing. However, I got to say that the outrage and chaos that is happening within the Democrat Party and on the far left is something that, you know, hey, it's pretty entertaining, okay? Because the Democrats and the left are dealing with a monster that they created during the George Floydification of America, which are individuals who believe that, hey, they're immune from any type of consequences for their violent rhetoric, and in some cases, a lot of cases, violent actions. And we've seen violent riot after violent riot after violent riot in this country from the far left, while we listen to the mainstream liberal media gaslight us and try to claim that, well, the biggest threats of violence in this country are people on the far right. These are the people you should be worried about when it comes to domestic violence and terrorism, when, again, a vast majority of the domestic violence in this country that we've seen since George Floyd have come from the left. BLM are leftists. Antifa are leftists. The Roe v. Wade rioters are leftists. And the pro-Palestinian rioters, for the most part, are leftists, okay? And again, what you see here is the same thing happening over and over and over again, because these people historically have not faced consequences for their actions, okay? Democrats have supported these people because they're useful tools against conservatives. But now that their monster that they created is turning on them, now all of a sudden Democrats care about the violent rhetoric and violence that has resulted from the radicalization of the base of their party. And that leads me to this latest protest at Columbia University by the pro-Palestinian protesters that the mainstream liberal media alleges, well, they're saying violent things because they're basically saying they identify with Hamas, which I think is just incredibly stupid and ignorant thing to say. But again, they're saying that this is violence, right? This is a form of violence, hate speech, and anti-Semitism, right? This is what they're saying. And these people, some of whom have been arrested for setting up encampments on campus, right? Staging these illegal or not university sanctioned protests. And some students have been suspended as well, too. Again, this has been a big news story over the past weekend.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jessica Moore. Demonstrators who took over the lawn of Columbia University put their tents back up today. Our cameras went inside the school for a first-hand look at the encampment. Today, the university said it is offering a remote option as some Jewish students raise concerns about safety ahead of Passover. CBS 2's Shosh Bedrosian is live in Morningside Heights with the latest on campus. Shosh.
Yeah, Jessica, well, the protesting outside of the school here has officially stopped. Today marks day 5 since students began their encampment on the quad here at Columbia. But this all started when the president of the school testified on Capitol Hill regarding anti-Semitic incidents that have happened on this campus. As for the Jewish community, with Passover coming up, they say no matter what the climate looks like on this campus, they will be celebrating just the same way as they do every year. On Monday evening, Jewish students at Columbia will be celebrating the first night of Passover. To make it feel more like home in a time where they say there's darkness, students and Rabbi Drizin at the university's Chabad are bringing matzah to campus to pass out, all while tuning out the sounds around them.
Sometimes it takes, at moments, just the individual walking with faith and confidence through whatever is in their way, in their face. Eventually it splits open and we make it through.
For the last 5 days, students on campus have been holding a pro-Palestinian encampment on the quad. The university tells us in a statement students do not have permission to set up tents on the lawn, and those who are in violation of long-standing university policy are subject to disciplinary action. Members of the Jewish community say they've been surrounded by anti-Semitic rhetoric as non-affiliated protests have taken over the streets outside the gates too. Rabbi Drizin says they've now hired private security to walk students to and from the Chabad house from their dorms for the Passover Seders.
In no reality is it okay that a Jewish kid shouldn't be okay to walk out of their dorm room to the Chabad house.
Columbia University has now issued guidance to allow the option of remote learning. On Sunday, the encampments went back up after being previously dismantled and more than 100 people arrested. A graduate student on the lawn told us they're protesting for Columbia to disinvest in Israel.
It's very disturbing to me to see the way that Columbia called the cops on its own students, and they're putting their professions on the line, their physical well-being, their mental well-being on the line in support of a cause that they know is just, which is Palestinian freedom in our lifetime.
Passover is a holiday commemorating liberation for the Jews. The Jewish community on campus is hopeful they'll be able to celebrate freely this Passover with more spirit than ever before.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Now, personally, I have not seen any videos of actual violence being done to any Jewish people at Columbia University. Although I have seen testimony from Jewish students at Yale University claiming that they were stabbed in the eye, even though if you actually listen to the story, it seems like they were poked in the eye with a flagpole more so than stabbed. But
So that was the scene at Yale over the weekend. Anti-Israel protests turning violent, injuring our next guest. She wrote a column on this saying, quote, "I was stabbed in the eye at Yale." The school has allowed anti-Israel students to run roughshod over their most basic policies. Yesterday, she writes, "I paid the price for their inaction." Yale student Sahar Tartak needed hospital treatment for that injury. She is doing well now, which we're happy to say, and she joins us now. Sahar, welcome. It's good to have you with us. Your piece is very moving on this morning in the Free Press. Tell me a little bit about what was going on when you were there. What did you see all around you? And then what happened?
Sure, of course. So over the past week or so at Yale, anti-Semitic student protesters have taken over a central plaza on our campus, setting up a tent encampment, among other things, pictures to commemorate terrorists, and this culminated in multiple nights of overnight encampment in the central plaza and protests with hundreds of people. I think it was 500 when I came on Saturday night. And as soon as I was identified with my friend who wears a black hat as visibly Orthodox Jewish students, I was immediately blockaded by protest organizers. And everywhere I walked, there was a line of protest organizers standing in front of me, linking arms, so that I could not walk forward. And the rest of the students at the rally noticed this, the other 500 students at this violent rally, and they saw me, and so they began to taunt me as well because they recognized that I was something that they view as an enemy. And finally, the taunting continued and escalated, and I was just there to record them. And the taunting escalated until somebody waved a Palestinian flag in my face and then jabbed me in my left eye. And from there, when I tried to run after him, the human blockade of protest organizers continued to stand in front of me to stop me from catching my assailant. And so I went to the hospital.
So I guess the argument is that, well, the Jewish students there are intimidated by the protesters saying things about Israel that they think are anti-Semitic, right? That seems to be the argument, and they're interpreting that as a potential threat of violence, that violence is imminent. Now, again, this is why I say that, in my opinion, I think that this is a part of the victimhood wars, right? This is basically a competition in regards to who has the strongest infinity stone of wokeness, right? That's actually what's happening here. And I think the pro-Palestinian coalition of color is finding out that you, in fact, do not have the most powerful infinity stone of wokeness. In some cases, your infinity stone of wokeness may help you out, okay? It may be a useful tool, but when it comes to those with the most powerful infinity stone of wokeness, you always are going to get overpowered, right? You're not going to win that battle. And I think that's kind of the takeaway here, okay? So this is why, again, I find a lot of this stuff to be entertaining, because the victimhood coalition of the left is falling apart because they really don't have all that much in common. And the only reason that they're aligned together is because the left tried to say, well, the enemy is the white Christian man, right? More specifically, the conservative white Christian man, right? That is the enemy that you need to go after. And that is what bonds you guys together, okay? And it looks like when you take out the conservative white Christian man, when you take him out of it, right? Again, the victimhood coalition implodes because, again, all of these people are very different, okay? They don't all share the same ideology, and they should have never been a part of the same team in the first place. But again, this is what Democrats do. They bring all these so-called people of color together, and, you know, the victims of America, they bring them all together in this coalition, and they say that, hey, you guys are all the same because the conservative Christian white male is the real enemy, right? And again, as you can see, as I pointed out multiple times, once you take him out of it, the coalition falls apart. So that brings me to the main point of this video, which is a story about Ilhan Omar's daughter. Now, everybody knows who Ilhan Omar is, okay? She is very pro-Palestine, okay? She's been very outspoken about being pretty much anti-Israel, right? And she's been accused of anti-Semitism. And her daughter was a part of the coalition of woke revolutionaries that got suspended and arrested from Columbia University for making the Jewish students uncomfortable. So she's speaking out about that and crying foul. And I want to read about it and then watch a video of an interview that she does with another woke revolutionary at MSNBC, in which, again, they're going to complain about what is happening to them. But again, she spoke out to Teen Vogue, and she essentially claimed that she is now homeless and hungry, right, because of what happened to her on campus. Let's read this real quick. This is her experience, okay, being arrested. She said, quote, "We had so many people who were born female in our group that they didn't have enough space for us. It was a very slow process in getting everybody into the cells," Hershey said. Okay, so again, listen to this language here. We had so many people who were born female in our group. You mean we had so many girls? Oh, we had so many women in our group. But again, this is how woke these people are. This is how they talk. This is how they speak. Okay? Again, this is why I find this to be so fascinating. Quote, "I was zip-tied for about 7 hours and wasn't released for about 8. She continued, estimating that it was between 9 and 9:30 p.m. by the time she got out, 13 hours after she had been arrested. I wonder what Ilhan Omar's reaction is to all this. But when she returned to campus, she found only more barriers. Hershey knew that she was suspended. It meant she no longer had access to her housing in the on-campus dorms. That meant she had also lost access to all of her possessions and didn't know where she could find housing that night. Quote, I was a little bit frantic, like, where am I going to sleep? Where am I going to go? And also all of my shit is thrown in a random lot. It's pretty horrible, she said. I don't know when I can go home, and I don't know if I ever will be able to, right? Again, you can just hear and feel the victimhood tears through the words, right? You can feel it, okay? The ultimate victim, okay? The victimhood wars are fascinating, the most fascinating thing going on in America right now, okay? It really is. To make matters worse, Hersey also lost access to the dining hall as a result of her suspension, where she had been getting the majority of her meals. She said she appealed to the administration for help, but was ultimately left to fend for herself. Quote, I sent them an email like, hey, I rely on campus for my meals. I rely on my dining plan. And they were like, oh, you can come pick up a prepackaged bag of food. A full 48 hours after I was suspended, there was no food support, no nothing, she said. So basically she's saying, I'm homeless and I'm hungry, right? So she wants us to feel bad for her, right? This is what she's trying to do here, okay? She's playing the victimhood card hard, okay? And I want to go ahead and play this video of MSNBC talking about this with her in this interview with this other activist here and react to it. Let's get into it.
Street tensions on college campuses have also reached a boiling point. At Columbia University here in New York City, more than 100 people were arrested on Thursday after occupying the school's South Lawn for 30 hours in support of Gaza. According to police, Columbia President Manu Shafiq asked the NYPD for help, citing a, quote, clear and present danger. But when asked to characterize the protest, the Columbia Spectator reports that Police Chief John Schell said the supposed clear and present danger was identified by Columbia University, not actually by the NYPD, and that the NYPD reported no violence or injuries associated with the Gaza Solidarity encampment. Among those arrested was Isra Hersey, daughter of Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. She had been suspended from neighboring Barnard College and was protesting at Columbia. Congresswoman Omar posted on X that she was proud of her daughter and, quote, stepping up to change what you can't tolerate is why we as a country have the right to speech, assembly, and petition enshrined in our Constitution. Isra Hersey is here with me now. Also joining the conversation, Mariam Alwen, a fourth-year Columbia student who helped organize the protest. She was also suspended and arrested. It's good to have both of you with us. I know, obviously, a very difficult time for you and for a lot of people on the campus. But let me just start, Isra, with how you see yourself being treated over the past couple of days. Just kind of walk us through, if you can, what you have been told, why you have been suspended, and your reaction to it.
Yeah, I guess I was suspended Thursday morning at 10 a.m. with two other fellow Barnard students. The email stated that we had engaged in disruptive behavior, but had not outlined the code of conduct that we had violated. The three of us were the only three that had done public interviews at that point. And so we think that our targeting or the reason we got suspended so early was due to the fact that we had made ourselves known. And then that the school got NYPD records to be able to arrest the rest of the students. How I'm feeling about it, however, I think a little bit like this was expected. We all knew the risks and we knew what we were engaging in. However, I wasn't really expecting to be immediately locked out of my dorm, of dining, of campus as quickly as I was.
Yeah, and to that point, Mariam, as well, you have been involved in the protests and in the campus, or on the campus, I should say. Talk to us about what experience you have had. What did the university tell you as to the reason why you were also suspended, and whether or not are you being treated differently than your fellow colleagues?
So Barnard seems to be a little bit more repressive than Columbia. I was notified that I was suspended yesterday, whereas they were notified, Isra specifically and two other students were told that they were suspended before we were arrested, and they were locked out of their housing. I was not locked out of my housing. However, ironically, we were arrested on the grounds of trespass, meaning that we would have had to have been suspended in order to be trespassing onto our own campus. But then the suspension letter said, you are suspended for violation of law because you were arrested for trespassing. So it doesn't really even make sense in the first place, and it feels like it's part of a repressive campaign against pro-Palestine advocacy that has been ongoing for months now.
The university was saying that part of the reason why they took this action, certainly the president of the university, was because, as I said, it posed a clear and present danger in the university, perhaps threatening other students. Talk to that charge. What was the encampment like? Do you see any validity that the encampment was threatening to other students, made other students feel uncomfortable?
No, I think that the encampment was honestly one of the beautiful forms of solidarity. We would be singing songs, we had meals together, people prayed together, they held Shabbat yesterday, and it's really just been a very community-centered space. And also because of the fact that it is outside, it hadn't disrupted any classes, and had really been a very isolated kind of moment where the zone in which we were actually protesting in is the demonstration zone that we are allowed to technically be able to protest in. And so the school had already placed this spot to be a place that is meant for these kind of actions, and therefore shouldn't have be seen as disruptive.
And to that point, Maryam, Columbia University has a long history of college protests. Did you see yourself a continuation of that long history of protests, or do you see yourself as being a different form of protest, that one that broke from tradition, or does it continue tradition?
We situate ourselves in a long legacy of activism, specifically on Columbia's campus. In fact, in 1968, I believe over 700 Columbia students were arrested when protesting the Vietnam War. And so when we set up this encampment, we also set up a sign that said Liberated Zone, which was a reference to previous protests. I remember the first day we held a teach-in with a professor about the history of the anti-apartheid movement on campus when South African apartheid was going on, and that's exactly what we were trying to do now when protesting our funding of Israeli apartheid and genocide in Gaza.
Yeah, so basically in a nutshell, Columbia bought this on themselves, right? That's essentially what happened, okay? Because, again, these woke colleges and universities teach these students that, hey, you know, you're supposed to stand up for this stuff. You're supposed to protest this stuff, right? And, you know, hey, I'm not saying that they're not supposed to stand up for what they believe is right and that, you know, they don't have the freedom of speech to protest. However, again, you have some of these individuals that are directly calling for violence. Like I did the story about the woman out in Bakersville, California, that just straight up directly called for violence. And I think that's what people are concerned about. Now, again, in this case, and these students, look, at the end of the day, I wasn't there. I don't know, right? I do know I did see videos of people saying that we are Hamas, and I can imagine that some of them probably were making violent threats. But I just find it to be fascinating how people care about the safety and well-being of these Jewish students on campus when it comes to these massive left-wing protests. Some of them are, you know, violent in nature. Some of them are just, you know, free speech or whatever. But when this happens to conservative speakers, right? When conservative speakers go on college campuses to talk, okay, and to speak, you have these woke revolutionaries that are out of control, that get violent, and they have these riots, and nobody gives a damn, including the Republican Party, right? That's my biggest issue with this. My biggest issue is the double standard between, okay, you're saying that, hey, this is not free speech for them to protest like this, right? But when it happens to a conservative, oh, well, that's free speech, right? Even though those people are being violent. That's what I have a problem with, okay? Why is it that all of a sudden now we concerned about the left being out of control and being violent when it affects a certain group of people, but when it affects conservatives, and conservatives are the victim of left-wing violence and threats, nobody gives a shit, right? Nobody cares. You don't see massive arrests being made. The Republicans don't care. Democrats, nobody cares. That's what really bothers me. It's the double standard. Because if the left-wing protests are free speech when they're doing it to conservatives on campus, right? When they're protesting conservatives like Kyle Rittenhouse or a Riley Gaines, we've seen that. We saw what happened to Riley Gaines. They were literally chasing her on campus. They were trying to physically harm her, okay? Oh, that's free speech, right? The students have the right to make their opinions heard, okay? This is what they say. But when you see these people protesting and Jewish students are intimidated by it, right? Even though I would argue that it seems to me that a lot of the protests are directed towards Israel, not necessarily Jewish students. Jewish students just happen to feel intimidated by it. Oh, well, that's not free speech anymore, right? Free speech kind of goes out the window. I'm just trying to figure out how that works. I'm trying to figure out how in the world are left-wingers protesting conservatives and rioting against conservatives and threats of violence against conservatives. How is that free speech? But yet when left-wingers protest and riot and issue threats of violence against Jewish students, all of a sudden now that's not free speech. I'm trying to figure it out, okay? Somebody make it make sense to me, right? That is my biggest takeaway from this story, because really I ain't got a dog in this fight, okay? I personally think that Both sides have legitimacy to their arguments. I personally think it's a conflict that doesn't really involve the United States of America, and we really shouldn't get involved in it. I just think that it's kind of disappointing to see that we have people in this country, including politicians, that are more passionate about other people's borders and their conflicts and what's going on in their countries rather than being concerned about what's going on in our country. And I think the main thing that people should be concerned about is the border, right? Is crime, the problems of America, right? So again, that's where I'm at, okay? That is where I'm at on this issue. But hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.